everybody. This is a VR for Mr. Eddie Gray over at the Pipe Nook, who's doing a giveaway for his 1,000 subscribers. He's got more than almost 1,100 actually, but every one of them well deserved. You've got a great channel. I love listening to you, watching you, interacting with you, and I just appreciate you, and I very much appreciate this giveaway. Even if you were not giving away a prize, I would do a VR to this because it's a big passion of mine. Like you, I'm very much into music, and I fully understand what you mean when you say you can get lost in it in 2 or 3 minutes. I can get lost in it in just a matter of notes and stay lost in it for hours, and it's been that way since I was about 12 years old. When John Lennon died, that kind of started my musical journey, and it's never really stopped. First concert I ever went to was Elvis, believe it or not. Huntsville, Alabama, 1975. Still had the ticket stubs. And I've seen countless shows since. I've got hundreds and hundreds of ticket stubs, but anyway, I've had so much music over the years, and it kind of saddens me that everything's digital now. I don't have albums anymore. I do have a couple of 8-track tapes laying around somewhere. I got a bunch of CDs, but most of what I listen to now is online, and it is what it is. I still like the albums, though. It doesn't matter what they put out, a CD or an online offering or whatever it is they call it. It's, to me, it will forever be an album. It's hard for me to classify a top 10 or top 15 list or something like that, because there's so many different genres that I love, and it's impossible to me to try to figure out whether Miles Davis kind of blue, or Tony Rice Church Street Station, or the Beatles Sgt. Pepper, which one's best, because they're completely different animals, and it's just impossible to do that for me. So I decided to go with the classic rock type genre because that's what I most listened to over the years. It's what I find myself falling back into more often than anything else. Even that, the challenge wasn't what to put on this list, it was what to leave off, because there's so many great albums by so many great artists, and to add them to this list I would have to leave something else off, and it just, felt like my brain was going to explode. But, so I came down to 15 of my favorite albums, and I also included 5 particular songs that just stop me dead in my tracks every time I hear them. So I hope that's okay, and I hope this doesn't go on forever. I'm already at 3.5 minutes, and I haven't even started, but I wanted to kind of give you a background over what I was going to say. Without further ado, these are in no particular order, because that would be a further hindrance of my brain power. This is an album I first heard when I was 12 years old. I first listened to it when I was 14 years old, and all the way through. And I first heard it and got into it and really delved into it when I was about 18 or 19. That's Pink Floyd, The Wall. That album is just an absolute masterpiece, and great band all the way through it. It's just the music, the lyrics, the passion, the energy, everything about it just sends chills up my spine. And I have listened to that album probably, I'm guessing, probably 250 times at least, and I can still put it on and just hit repeat and listen to it over and over and over again. There's so much stuff in there and the way those songs intertwine together and the story that it tells just blows me away. So that's one. Another one that's very similar to that is Jethro Tull's Aqualung. I think it's one of the most beautiful rock albums ever written and performed. From the craziness of Ian Anderson's vocals and flute pyrotechnics and stuff like that, to the simple beauty of the acoustic guitar and some of the different stuff that's going on that album. It's another one that sends chills up and down my spine. It's a fantastic album. It's the best thing Jethro Tull ever did, in my opinion, by far. But it's right up there on par with one of the best concept albums ever made as well. You can say that about The Wall too. Number 3, this is pure rock and roll to its bone marrow. The Rolling Stones, Exile on Main Street. That album is where they absolutely hit their stride from start to finish for me. There's not a fill song on it. It's a double album. It's their best lineup. And it's just guts and grit, rock and roll, down and dirty, just nasty. And there's a lot of bands that have come since the Rolling Stones that draw heavily on that sound, on that style, and specifically on that album. It's a fantastic album. It's my favorite Stones album. Number 4, that's a little more in the future, and this is one of those bands that drew heavily off that Exile on Main Street album. The Black Crowes, Southern Harmony and Musical Companion. That one came out, this is the most recent album on this list, I think. It's between this and one other one, in '92. And I had anticipated it for months. I was introduced to the Black Crowes when WKDF in Nashville, when they used to be a rock station, did this thing called Sunday Night Six Pack. And they would play 6 albums in a row in their entirety, no commercials. And it would be like 2 old albums, 2 more recent classic albums, and 2 brand new albums. And that was one of the brand new albums they played, actually before it was released. And I recorded it. I happened to be recording it that night. And I just fell in love with the band and have been ever since. And when they put their second album out, Southern Harmony, they were firing on all cylinders. Had a new guitarist, Mark Ford, and buddy, they were big time. I went to see them in concert that year in Nashville at T-Pack, and one of the best concerts I ever saw as well. But that is a gritty album as well, full of soul, just hits me in all the right places. Love that band. Number 5, I remember the first time I ever heard this album. My sister-in-law played it, and I was probably, I don't know, 12, 11, maybe a little bit older than that, 13 probably. But anyway, this album is a miracle to me. Fleetwood Mac, Rumors, the turmoil that band was going through when they made that album, and they were able to put something together that fantastic, just blows me away every time I hear it. And it's another one from start to finish. There's not a bad song on it. There's no filler. Every single song is strong enough to carry most albums, and it's just a knockout album. Buckingham, Nix, Christine McVie. There's some great songs that are written on that album, and I absolutely love that one. Number 6 is Yes, Close to the Edge. There's only 3 songs on the album, but it's like 45 minutes long. Fantastic album. I love Yes. They're one of the most musically proficient groups of people I've ever seen. I've seen them live, and they recreate everything note for note without leaving out any soul. And they, to me, are the pinnacle of progressive rock. and that is their best album by far to me. And You and I is one of the songs. It's got 3 long parts in it, and then Close to the Edge. And I can put on headphones and just drift. That album is just fantastic. Number 7, this is another recent one. This was released in '92. This one came out when I was very much into heavy stuff, and this was as heavy as it got. And this is another album I can put on, and note for note, I know what's coming up. I've listened to it so many times. It brought me out of some doldrums that I was going through quite a few times, and I love this album. It's Soundgarden, not Super Unknown, Bad Motorfinger. I've even got it written down and read it wrong. Soundgarden's Bad Motorfinger. It's the one with Outshined, and that's probably the most popular song on there, but just fabulous from start to finish. About midway through the album, it hits this peak, and the whole album kind of builds up to that point, and then it's just a peak from that point on out for me. It just never stops. Fantastic album. Number 8. This one was difficult because they've got 5 albums that any one of them could have been on this list for me. The reason I chose this one is kind of one of those desert island albums, in that it has more songs than any of the other albums. And, this one is Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti. I think Jimmy Page was probably at his peak as far as his studio tricks and his production, and some great songs on that album. Again, I sound like a broken record, but from start to finish, there's not a song on there I would skip. It's just great. Number 9. I had a hard time with this one too, and I chose this particular album because of its contribution to history, I guess you could say. This is the best live album to me that was ever recorded. And you probably know what I'm going to say before I even say it. Everybody out there want to pause and take a guess? Here's your chance. Allman Brothers Band, live at the Fillmore East. Everybody in that band was just firing on 8 cylinders. Dwayne Allman just kills it all the way through. Dickie Betts is right there with him. The singing, Greg Allman's vocals are killer. Everything about it is just stellar. It is a moment in history that I'm really, really glad that it was recorded. There's some other great live albums out there, but this one to me is the one that all others will forever be judged by. Just fantastic. Number 10, a little more heaviness. Going back to about 1970, I believe. Black Sabbath, Paranoid. As a band, I think this was them at their peak. It was only their second album, but they never reproduced, never gelled for an entire album the way they did on this album. They put out some other great music after this and before it, but this album is cohesive as cohesive gets as far as this genre of music goes. It's heavy, it's hard hitting, it's they were going for something dark and they nailed it, and it's killer. Ozzy's singing, Tony's guitar licks. I call him the riff master. There's nobody out there that plays a guitar riff driven music like him. And Geezer Butler, with all the songwriting on that album, knocked it out of the park. Number 11, The Who. Who's Next? Love that album from the first moment I heard it. I remember the day I bought it. I bought it on CD the first time, and it just knocked me out. To me, a lot of other Who albums have songs that don't really hold up very well over time, and you know, 2 or 3 of them here and there on just about every album. This album doesn't have any of those. I could hear any one of these songs on the radio and feel like I had a good representation of what's on that album. It's just solid, front to start. Number 12, The Beatles. Most people pick a different album as a favorite Beatles album. I think they're influenced by history and other people in that instance a lot of times. For me, Sgt. Pepper's is a great album, but it's weird in a lot of places, and some of those songs will not stand up on their own. They're there because, I don't know, that's what they felt like putting there, I guess. But to me, the Beatles' best album, and again, there's 4 of them that I could put on here, and I chose Abbey Road. Side 2 of Abbey Road is one of the best musical journeys that a person can take. The way that they put that together and ran all those songs together and turned them into one big movement, I just think that's fantastic. Can't beat that album to me. I love Abbey Road. Forever love Abbey Road. My favorite Beatles songs are not on that album, with the exception of one. But most of my favorite Beatles songs are on different albums, and I'm a big Beatles fan. Number 13, this is another hard-edged, kind of a game-changing album for me. It defined an era of music, and that was the new wave of British heavy metal. That's after the 70s stuff had subsided and a lot of pop and stuff like that came in. And then a lot of those English guys got together and said, you know what? I miss Black Sabbath. I miss King Crimson. A lot of bands came out of this movement right here. A lot of great bands. And this one is my favorite album by this band, and my favorite band of this genre. It's Iron Maiden, Number of the Beast. I love that album. They reproduce it live. They play almost every song on that album live. There's only a couple of them that they don't really pull off there, but it's just a killer album. It was something completely different when it came out, and like I said, it started. If it wasn't for that album, bands like Metallica and stuff like that may or may not have existed. Motorhead and a lot of those guys were in that same kind of movement, and it's just fantastic. Sorry, I'm making sure a skunk isn't coming over here. So, all right. Initially, I stopped at 10, and I added these last 5, so because I couldn't leave them off. Number 14 is another one of those albums. When it came out, it was a sound that had not been heard before. New guitar player nobody had ever heard of, or very few people. And this is him at his absolute best. He had a very short career and tragic death. This album is Ozzy Osbourne's Blizzard of Oz. And that's when Randy Rhoads and him hooked up and did some fantastic, stellar stuff. There's some great things on that album. One of my favorite parts on there, a lot of people like Randy Rhoads, the little acoustic piece that he did on there called D. My favorite part of the album is when that song ends and they go into the next song. It's just like this dose of heaviness, this wall of sound. It just blows me away. And I think the sequencing of that album is genius. The way that album's put together is an absolute work of art. Number 15 is another one of those albums. Sound like a broken record, I know. Metallica, Master of Puppets. That was them at their best. And the band changed after the bass player died. They're still a great band, I think. They put out some really good stuff. The albums that came before Master of Puppets were hard and raw. I mean, like You feel like you're bleeding when you get through listening to some of it. Master of Puppets put everything that is Metallica before and after together in one album, and it just crushes me every time I hear it. It's a great album. Alright, so that's my list of albums. And there's some songs out there that every time I hear them on the radio or wherever, I absolutely stop whatever I'm doing and listen to the song from start to finish every time, no questions asked. These are just some great songs. Number one, in my opinion, is the best progressive rock song ever written, and that's Carry On Wayward Son by Kansas. It's just about the perfect rock song to me. I just love that song. I can hear the whole thing in my head. Actually, one time I had an MRI, and as I was inside the MRI machine with all that noise and crap that's going on, to keep myself sane, I played that song in my head. And, I feel like I hit every note. It's just a great song. Number two, this is probably my favorite guitar solo ever recorded, and it's not like a Eddie Van Halen Eruption kind of guitar solo, but it fits the song better than any solo fits any song, in my opinion. That is Baker Street by Jerry Rafferty. It just knocks me out. There's a version out there, a radio edited version, that cuts off part of the song, and if I ever hear it on the radio and that part comes on, it just destroys me from the inside out. I complain to no end. Number three, no, where are we? There it is. Time by Pink Floyd. It's another fantastic guitar solo in that song. That whole album, Dark Side of the Moon, could have been on this list very easily, and it would be on my top 20 list for sure. Great album, but that song to me is the best of the best when it comes to Pink Floyd. It beats Comfortably Numb, in my opinion. It's just a fantastic song. Stops me dead in my tracks. Number four, After the Gold Rush by Neil Young. That song, I don't know what it is about it. It's just a beautiful song. Even with Neil Young's nasally singing, it's just like the perfect song. And I absolutely love it. I've heard a bunch of different versions of it. Most of those I like as well. There's actually a version of it by Dolly Parton, Emmylou Harris, and Linda Ronstadt that they did on one of the Trio albums that'll just knock your socks off. But that's a great song. That is a fantastic piece of work by Neil Young, and I love it. Number five, one of their albums could have been included on this list as well, but again, I couldn't figure out what to leave off. This song is just a beautiful song to me. It's Southern Cross by Crosby, Stills and Nash. It takes me away. I feel like I'm floating on a sailboat out in the middle of nowhere, looking up at the stars, and it takes me there every single time I hear it. Great song. I really appreciate this contest, Eddie. This is a great idea. I'm looking forward to the video responses because I know there's hundreds of great things out there that every one of us will have forgotten about until somebody mentions it. And I'm looking forward to digging through these VRs because there's going to be some good stuff in there. I'm at 24 minutes now. I'm surprised I was able to keep it under 25 actually. But, anyway, thanks again for the contest. Congrats on all your subs. Keep up the good work. And like Pipe Smoking Dieter says, rock on.